Are we jailing too many people or too few? Do cops protect citizens or harass them? Do immigrants add to the crime rate? Part 2 of our look at crime, punishment, and the police right now on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Memorial Care is transforming the way healthcare is delivered, keeping our communities and businesses healthy by guiding them on the path to wellness with easily accessible hospitals, physician offices, and outpatient centers. Memorial Care, leading the way.
Hi, I'm Rick Reiff. We recently heard about the rising crime rate from two people with a lot of insight but different perspectives. UCI Irvine criminologist Charis Kubrin and retired Anaheim police captain Joe Vargas. But when the show ended, they were just warming up. They went on about guns, policing tough neighborhoods, criminal sentencing, gangs, and illegal immigration. So here's our crime show, part 2.
Here's the thing, too, is that the hypervigilance of officers, it's not paranoia when the threat is real. To capture the data of the number of guns that are taken off every day, just in Orange County alone, from convicted felons, that's an armed encounter that was resolved without the use of violence.
Yeah, I think that's really an important, I mean, there are so many conflicts that are resolved without the use of violence, without the police shooting the individual. That is very true. And
I guess maybe I have too much of an old school perspective, but at some point it seems the whole society's attitude changed from like, don't screw around with a cop. If a cop tells you something, even if he's being a jackass, do what he says.
And the vast majority of people do that.
To the cop being a professional who is supposed to be able to handle any situation in a split-second, dispassionate RoboCop sort of way. When did that attitude
we
change?
entrust the police with so much authority. They're the only individuals that can handcuff you, lock you up, take away your freedom. I do think we need to hold them to a high standard.
But they're putting their life on the line when they do that.
That is true. That's the nature of their work. That is not to say that we handcuff them and don't let them police. What I think these cases raise is the question of what can be done in police departments and in police community relations, community is part of that, in order to minimize these incidents happening. And if we can spend some time, and I give New York as the perfect example, we were talking about that. New York City had a police use of force policy that I think we can all agree, if you review it, was a bit too much. Even the police department had been trying to say, okay, we don't need to use these chokeholds. There's other ways to do it. And I think these are opportunities to identify ways that we can fix things. And not just for the police, but for the community as well.
Okay.
Well, so let's face it, I mean, you bring up a good point. What happened to compliance? The number one way to reduce police use of force across the country is compliance. If people would comply with officers, I saw a video not too long ago where there was somebody riding their bike in the business district and there had been a bunch of complaints from the merchants. The officer goes to stop the individual and there's resistance. No way, you're not going to stop me. The officer feels he's obligated to detain because, oh my gosh, I'm going to cite you. And it ends up being a physical struggle for a minor infraction. But the attitude of this young person, who was Anglo, by the way, was that I don't have to listen to you.
But is there actually data showing that people are less compliant? I think now we just see videotapes of this sort of thing. I bet I've been watching car chases since I was 5 years old growing up in Los Angeles. People are always evading the police, not listening to what they're doing. That's the nature of it. So I'm not quite sure that this non-compliant attitude that you're talking about is a real thing. What I do think is real is that we are being exposed to what is going on between the police and the community in ways that we were never exposed before.
Well, what about the idea that where we see those videos, isn't it true that in almost all those cases there is some element of the victim, if you will, not doing what most people would do, which is, okay, officer.
You know, the most people, which is your perspective, right, I think does not acknowledge that you are not perhaps an African-American young man living in a community where maybe you've been stopped by the police.
I have been
Wait,
stopped.
just listen, right? But where you've been stopped, like, let's take, you live in a neighborhood in New York City where they've instituted stop and frisk. And you are being stopped on a routine basis, because if you look at stop and frisk policies, they show you the number of people that were stopped, okay? And they show, this is why it was ruled unconstitutional in 2013. The percentage of African Americans and Latinos that were stopped was like 3 times as high as the percentage population in the neighborhood. Okay, so then it is some bit of racial profiling. But what would your attitude be if you were routinely being stopped, even if you hadn't done anything wrong, but constantly being stopped where you're searched and then led on your way, but it's interrupting your day? What kind of relationship are you going to have with the police if that is your only interaction
Well, I might say
with the police?
I got to move out of this neighborhood if I can.
Well,
you know,
that's great, but not if you're living
right,
in poverty.
But
I mean, I guess I'm saying, like,
I
think the work Joe's
or
done.
I might say, you know, officer, thanks for being so diligent, but I'm, I'm not the guy you're looking for. And
you know what was really interesting when we started not profiling, but randomly selecting people to be searched on flights after 9/11, you would not believe the anger that people experienced, including my parents, who were like, why am I being stopped? I don't have time to be stopped. And I was like, this is interesting. Being stopped, being questioned, being frisked routinely can erode trust between the police and the community, especially if, you know, do you know what percentage of stop and frisks stops actually turned up something? 3%.
Again, though, maybe there's a deterrent effect from it, right?
3%. So here's the question. Is the deterrent effect, whatever that may be, worth it when you look at the potential impact that constant stop and frisk has, especially if it's perceived as racially unjust, which it was ruled that way. I mean, stop and frisk doesn't have to be unconstitutional, but it was in New York City.
There are ways to do stop and frisk, and I actually do feel it's a necessary thing to get out of a car and talk to people, especially in those areas where the victimization rate is very high. You look at the rates and percentages of African American and Hispanic young men that are killed. It's way, way out of whack when it's compared to the Anglo community. But the way to do it constitutionally, I mean, I know in Orange County we practice the consensual encounter. Hey, how's it going? Having a great day? That kind of thing. And then developing a conversation from there. And from there, okay, this guy is not a gang member. He's not on probation. He's not on parole. Thanks. See you later. And there are ways to engage and connect and make neighborhoods safer and do it constitutionally, where your presence is seen, that people feel safer, and at the same time connect you with those neighborhoods.
Exactly, the connection. I've interviewed some of these youth in these communities where they have these tense interactions with the police. They have described situations where they can be stopped up to 5 times a day. Now, nothing happens. They're very respectful. I mean, most of the folks that I know, when they talk to the police, they have been taught by their parents, sir, ma'am, listen to what they do. I mean, I'm not quite sure if that we're drawing conclusions about the behavior of these individuals from the select cases that we've seen across the country. I don't know. You're the expert here. Most people, I would assume, do what the police say.
Absolutely. And quite frankly, though, I can tell you that for most cops, especially like in a gang unit, when they're out stopping people, how many other young Latino men did they not stop? Typically, there's something that drew their attention. There was a behavior that they observed that made them feel there was a need for a contact. And to articulate that behavior is sometimes difficult. But, you know, you go through a neighborhood like a barrio where there's been a lot of shootings, it requires that you get out of the car and talk to people. There were a lot of people that didn't get talked to. There were a lot of people that didn't get engaged. And whether it's a police sense that's difficult to articulate, officers see something and they feel they have to do something. I drove by a garage once many years ago, quite a long time ago, and just from the nod of the head, the consciousness of guilt, the hand of the cookie jar, we go in, we bring everybody out, 2 handguns are secreted and they're waiting for rival gang members to come by. Was that, how do I articulate, the way he looked at me made me feel something was on, and there had been gang violence in the neighborhood. People are alive today because a sixth sense said something went on there, but I was able to articulate the look on their face, the consciousness of guilt, the furtive movement, And it was, both, several people were prosecuted in that case. But that happens every day.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, and I think, your success is evident of that. But I guess I wonder, when you have a program like Stop and Frisk in New York, and I forget how many millions of stops they made over the 3-year period, but it was in the millions, and as a result of Stop and Frisk, and then you turn up 3% involved arrests. I guess I wonder if that is the best policing strategy. I mean, the question is, what alternative policing strategies or other strategies do we have? I mean, we could throw everybody in prison, right? We could throw everybody in prison and the crime rate would go down. It wouldn't go down to 0, that's the amazing thing. And then crimes in prison would go up. But every time we throw someone in prison in California and we put them there for a year, that's $60,000. My question is, could that $60,000 be spent in a different way to curb crime? That's what Prop 47 is about.
My feeling was, first of all, it was a lie the way it sold it. Safe streets and neighborhoods. Most people didn't even read the proposition. They just saw the title and voted for it because, hey, this sounds good. Did not understand the impact, but the rehabilitation portion of that still hasn't come to fruition.
It's on its way, though.
Yeah.
Counties just submitted plans, and they're vying for funds to be able to use that Prop 47 savings.
Right, and we'll get right back to that.
My thought on rehabilitation, by the way, is that the best place for real rehabilitation is where the person has to get it. And that best place occurs in prison. You know how many people are released every day and didn't get a single day of therapy or any type of rehabilitative behavior, and they're put back out on the streets into the same neighborhoods, exposed to the same environment with no skill sets. There isn't a police chief or sheriff I've ever talked to who doesn't believe in the value of rehabilitation, but California pretty much would just warehouse people with nothing in place. Personally, I believe that had services been put in place, especially for a lot of people with drug issues, and they had the skill sets to come back out into the normal communities, they wouldn't have gone back, or at least a certain percentage of them wouldn't have gone back. But to say that you're going to provide rehabilitative services outside of a custody environment, if you've ever had a relative or a family member that's had to deal with substance abuse, unless they want it and take advantage of it, or at the bottom, in the gutter, it's difficult to offer those services and have people take advantage of them. Look at drug courts right now. The drug courts are empty. I mean, Orange County used to have 50 cases plus in the docket every day. They're lucky if they get 6 because there's no teeth behind it anymore.
The reality,
Charis, I saw you nodding. Do you
No,
agree with that?
I agree with the rehabilitation point. I do not think prisons are the place to rehabilitate people. I really think that is like just, that sounds backwards to me. Let's go.
It sounds backwards,
Yeah,
but
I completely agree with rehabilitation. To me, what Prop 47 did was bring into greater alignment the way in which we charge people and punish them. I think for so long, our punishment was so out of proportion to the crime committed. I think we need to be focusing on serious offenders. That's who needs to be in our prisons. That's who needs to be filling up our prisons, not these low level of offenders. I mean, we got to the incarceration we did in California, not because we put in so many more serious offenders. We just started putting people in for drug crimes. We took people that violated probation and parole, sent them back to state prison, and we filled our prisons. And the state went broke. We overcrowded, and the Supreme Court had to step in. That's pretty drastic.
Well, let's go back.
So my thing is that what we've done with AB 109 and Prop 47, this is low-hanging fruit. We are not letting individuals out that have committed very serious crimes. AB 109 is the triple nons: non-serious, non-sex, non-violent. So no wonder violent crime didn't go up after we let these folks out. They weren't violent offenders to begin with. Prop 47 is going the next route by focusing on these low-level drug offenders. I still think they absolutely need rehabilitation. The intent of Prop 47 was to take the savings from not putting these folks into prison, $60K a year, and to put that back towards rehabilitation. I don't know why the funds have not materialized. Okay, they are just now beginning to, and every county just recently, as of weeks ago, submitted their plan for how they would use the Prop 47 dollars.
If I hear Joe, though, he's a little skeptical that this will actually do much good because these people will not seek rehabilitation.
Yeah, well, Anaheim right now has a program where anybody who walks into that police department and wants help with the drug addicted problem, they've contracted with a counseling and social services referral center. Everything is placed. Only a handful of people have taken advantage of it. Our homeless outreach teams have those resources available. Just a smidgen of people take advantage of it. What is the incentive? You know, without the possibility of further incarceration, how do you motivate people? And typically, you know, if you've reached the last rung on the ladder and there's nowhere else to go and the only way to go up is up, oftentimes that's what's happening. I mean, we're so struggled right now. I mean, the cops are getting the blame for the homeless problem. And
I've actually heard the opposite. I've heard, Skid Row right now, the police officers are doing amazing things in Skid Row because what I have understood about what's going on in Skid Row from a colleague who's doing research there is that there's been increased shootings there and increased crimes with Skid Row residents as the victims. And what I understand that the police officers are doing there is they are really working hard in Skid Row to make sure that these individuals are not being victimized.
So you're hearing good things about the cops in that regard. You're hearing...
well, they are. I mean, almost every department in Orange County has a homeless outreach team. They bring a lot of resources. And the frustration of talking to a supervisor, one of those units, we have everything to get them out of where they're at. But very few take advantage of it, whether it's a lifestyle choice, drug addiction, or mental illness. You know, how do you get people to do what needs to be done in order to better their circumstances? Drive along the 57 freeway here, and you know, what's the frustration of the average citizen when they see that? Or worse yet, they can't use the neighborhood park anymore because it's just not safe.
By the way, I appreciated the piece that you wrote on homelessness. Like, what was that, a year ago or so? Yeah, so, I mean, I actually agree completely with his statements about that,
As you may have surmised, you're going such great guns here, I've decided, let's keep it going for a little bit more. Because maybe we'll
Thanks for the heads up.
Because maybe we'll do a part 2 here. So we'll just continue, and there are some things that we haven't gotten to. So let me switch gears a little bit and talk about 2 things that are often discussed in relation to crime. One is gangs, another is immigration. So let's talk first about gangs. Joe, is gangs still problem number 1 for cops on the
Well, just
street?
ask the city of Santa Ana if gangs are a problem. You know, just ask at certain areas of LA if gangs are a problem. Ask Chicago if gangs are a problem. The circumstances that create and generate gangs and gang behavior are still there. Socioeconomic disparity, high school dropout rates, and they have to be dealt with because they create an environment where even if there's not a lot of, if you have a gang in your neighborhood, you never know when another gang is going to come in. A 9-year-old girl is killed in a bystander type shooting in Anaheim, and there's outrage, but after that it just dies down. I've worked with kids for years, as you know, I've been on the board of directors of Cops for Kids, and quite frankly, if we can get them in the playpen, we can keep them out of the pen. And the focus for gangs needs to start in elementary school. The GRIP program in Orange County is a great example of trying to motivate. Quite frankly, gang behavior is difficult. Once a kid has made a decision to become part of a gang, getting people out of gangs takes a lot of work. Intervention.
And it can be dangerous for the person involved?
Well, it's not dangerous, but there has to be incentive for them to want to leave, to want to get out, and typically they find a girl, they get married, and maybe they'll time out of the gang. But when we look at a lot of the shootings and homicides, specifically in Orange County, a lot of those have their root in gang behavior. And that's the one that makes people, how do you feel when you come out and you see all the graffiti up and down? Your first thought is, do I have gangs or do I have taggers in my neighborhood? Quite frankly, I think if we committed more of our resources to dealing with young people, the gang problem would be easily dealt with.
Yeah, your thought, have you studied this?
I haven't studied gangs in particular. My sort of position on this is what my position is with all of the causes of crime, which is that I think mostly in this country we deal with what I call back-end solutions, which is increased punishment. So when problems exist and crime goes up, our knee-jerk reaction is to put more people away for longer periods of time. What we know from the public health, sociological, and criminological literatures is that you need front-end solutions, not exclusion, not only, but you need some balance between punishing people, but also prevention. And whether that prevention is mental health treatment or, things to deal with homeless population or gang outreach programs or poverty alleviation or housing instability programs that help people find housing. I could go on and on and on. Until you deal with some of that, just punishing at greater rates and for longer periods of time is really not going to budge the needle.
I hear both of you saying that rehabilitation is important, and catching them early, catching them in the playpen, as Joe said. So just bottom line, Joe, quick answer: are gangs about the same problem they've always been? Are they less more so?
I agree with Charis here, and that is the gang rate of shootings is lower than it was. The 1990s were ridiculous. I was a patrol officer and a supervisor during that era, and it was routine to get 4 or 5 shootings in a single weekend. We're light years away from that. But that doesn't mean a squat to the person who's a victim of a gang-related crime.
Let me ask something. I had heard over the years that probably if there is one factor that determines crime rate more than any other, it's how many young males are in the population. Because most crimes are committed by males between the ages of 18, 24, or whatever. And after that, they get married, they have kids, and buy a house, and then they're done. They're finished. They're finished. Their crime days are over. So is that maybe in part why we saw this decline, and now we're seeing an uptick because we've got more young males?
Yeah, that could be. So I mean, one of the things as a criminologist we always say is it's never just one thing. It's never Prop 47 that's causing crime to go up or down. It's never just young males. There are a whole constellation of factors that cause
unemployment or whatever.
Unemployment, poverty, homelessness, mental health issues, gangs, drugs, drug markets. I could go on and on and on. So you really have to examine all of these factors. It makes it very difficult to pinpoint people want to know what is the one thing. If I could hang my hat on one thing and I tell them you're not going to like my answer, as a criminologist, it's a constellation of factors. And these factors range from demographic composition, things like young males or immigration, which I'm happy to talk about, to police community relations, to the other factors that I mentioned earlier. So it's really looking at how all of these things change over time to understand crime trends.
Okay, so you mentioned immigration. Let's talk about that. That is something you have studied a lot.
Yes.
Tell us, what's your whole view on this idea that illegal immigration and even sanctuary cities encourage crime?
Well, let me back up and say I have been studying the immigration-crime relationship since 2005. So I have been studying this before immigration became the focus of President Trump's executive orders. But over the course of these 15 years or so, every single study I have done, as well as those of my colleagues, have found 2 things consistently. 1, immigrants are less crime-prone than the native-born population. In other words, they commit fewer crimes than folks born in the United States. And 2, immigration to an area causes crime to go down rather than up. And I could show you hundreds of studies that have consistently found these findings. In fact, I was involved in a National Academies panel where I had to present a report on every single thing we know about the immigration-crime relationship, and that was my conclusion. And what is amazing to me is the extent to which those findings have not made their way into the public imagination. In other words, you will hear people say left, right, and center, immigrants are crime prone. They are causing our crime rates to go up, right? I mean, the executive orders that we're seeing now reflect that assumption. And it is not true.
That's a very powerful assertion. Let me ask the cop on the street, Joe. What is your take on
Well,
on
I can
this
tell you
issue?
that I probably attended every International Association of Chief Police conference for the last 10 years of my career. And it was never a point of discussion in any of our breakout sessions about the huge problem with immigrant-related crime. It's never discussed. We talked about gangs, we talked about drug trafficking, we even talked about dysfunctional family homes as being a major cause of crime. Never was it immigrants. But the challenge for the police executives in our cities is the fact that they have large immigrant communities, and they have to be able to connect with those communities. These people have to be able to look at the police and say if they are the victim of a crime, to report that crime. Absolutely. And if you don't have these people reporting crime, does that create unsafe communities or places that are less livable when criminals now have a target-rich environment with victims left and right? It creates a huge problem when, let's say, ICE shows up and is rounding up people and asks for local assistance. And with the social media today, we've seen it in Tucson, we've seen it in Phoenix, we've seen it in LA, the pictures are immediately broadcast, and next thing you got the entire neighborhood surrounding them. And now what do the local police do when they say, well, we're not working with immigration, but now we have to protect them and help them?
Yeah.
And it puts us in a little bit of a tough spot. Plus, many people like myself, you say we're a more diverse police department. How many of our Hispanic officers are direct descendants from illegal immigrants? And now they're having to go out and people are saying, we want you to go and pick up people that look like your mom and dad and your aunts and your uncles.
Okay, well, listen, thanks again. We have gone a long way here, so as I said, maybe we'll make this a part 2. And thanks again to Charis Kubrin and Joe Vargas. You can watch this show and our prior show on crime, as well as other past shows, by going to pbssocal.org or rickreiff.com. You can also catch our shows and our post-show open mic chatter on YouTube. And follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again on Inside OC. Inside OC is brought to you by...
Each new community 5 Point brings to life represents a promise delivered. Great neighborhoods are more than just places to live, they are places to connect. 5 Point is a proud sponsor of public television and community programming.
Chapman University in the City of Orange. Chapman University is a proud sponsor of Inside OC and community programming.